Kongres Współpracy Transgranicznej Lublin 2021. Coroczne spotkanie praktyków współpracy transgranicznej z Unii Europejskiej i krajów Partnerstwa Wschodniego. 3 dni debat, paneli i warsztatów z udziałem liderów samorządów, organizacji pozarządowych, ekspertów z całej Europy. Wizyty studyjne, wydarzenia towarzyszące, koncerty, spektakle. Na żywo i online. Lublin, 5-7 października 2021. Zarejestruj się bezpłatnie na stronie Kongres Lublin EU.
Witamy Państwa bardzo serdecznie.
Dzień dobry.
Jest z nami pan Paweł.
Good morning, everyone. I have with me Paweł Prokop, head of the organization committee of our Congress, and Director Krzysztof Stanowski.
I Krzysztof Stanowski, dyrektor organizacyjny kongresu,
Organization director
Biura Centrum Współpracy Międzynarodowej,
and the head of International Cooperation Office in Lublin Municipality.
Witamy. Spotykamy się w tym roku podwójnie. Zarówno poprzez
We're meeting here in two ways, on-site and off-site, and we are very happy to have you here with us in person. Those of you who need interpretation into your mother tongue or any other language you know, please pick your headset in the corridor. Polish Channel 1, English Channel 2, Russian Channel 3. Our Congress is also being transmitted online in 3 languages. All items in the agenda are interpreted into these 3 languages. I'd like to ask Mayor Krzysztof to take the floor. Mr. Mayor is our host and a person who, at least for the last 10 years, has been the great supporter of this event. Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Lublin, the biggest city in eastern Poland, aspires to forge partnerships with cities, with communities, including behind the EU borders. But not only, we have about 40 sister cities, or twin cities, as they put it, across Europe. Most of them are not far from here in Eastern Partnership countries. We have extensive experience in building a new city or laying the foundations for a new city, including economic transformation, which wasn't easy back in the 1990s. And then the following decades have shown that we have achieved a lot, and we know how to implement best strategies, how to collect best practice, how to absorb funds. And, well, as many other partners in Central Eastern Europe, we have learned by our errors. And this discussion that we have been holding for the last 10 years teaches us how not to make mistakes. Minister or Nancy, our twin cities in Western Europe, taught us a lot about best practice in city management. We have our partners in East Central Europe with whom we discuss projects in, for example, transportation or modern city management. We learn from each other. This is what I hope for. And our exchange of experience, of ideas, and the overall debate on the future of our cities is absolutely necessary. When we look at the main trends across Western Europe cities, the first thing is green transformation and innovative business, creative industries, you name it. But before we reach this point, we have to go through a number of projects. We have to invest in social and hard infrastructure. We have to do what they did many years ago. Therefore, we are particularly happy to be able to work, for example, in Chisinau, Moldova. We will run a project together, a project on collective public transport system. We're very happy that similar projects are implemented with our Ukrainian partners. So on the one hand, we have EU funds available. On the other hand, we are happy to support. And together with our partners, we are defining how to move on to the new EU perspective, how to set or embed new projects so relevant for the city and for our partners in the new programming period. Thank you so much for coming here in person. Last year, it was not possible. Of course, we have some COVID restrictions still in place. That's why this event is a hybrid event in a sense. But I'm very happy that we can speak face to face, and I do hope next year we will have forgotten about the pandemic. Lublin is proud in its multi-billion investments. It's proud in its universities, but it's a city of innovative, dynamic industry, mainly powered by small and medium businesses. So this is a very interesting tissue, a very interesting structure, because this is very responsive. It's very flexible to respond to market needs and adapt to specific conditions. Lublin can serve also as a model, as a city that has collected best practice and will be happy to share them with you, with our partners. Thank you, and have productive talks. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for opening our event. You don't even know how happy we are that we can talk face to face, that this 10th Congress is not online, it's hybrid. It's not the same, of course, as talking through screens. Last year, we had a great dilemma. We had a great challenge, what to do. And we decided to go online. I'm happy this year we are back here together. Some of us, of course, online, but many of us right here on the spot. We'll be here to talk what is relevant about participation, about green, about shared space, about spatial planning and development, about cooperation with the youth, about entrepreneurship, innovation in business, and about culture, last but not least. And we keep underlining that the main catchphrase, the main slogan here is Lublin in solidarity with Belarus. Yesterday we started with a very touching concert by Belarusian musicians representing different genres, but what they had in common was that they fled the regime, they settled in Poland, they can grow their talents and their activity here. So welcome to the 10th Jubilee edition of our Congress, and we are very happy, and I can't wait to see all our talks in the coming 3 days.
10 years ago, I came from Warsaw to Lublin, and I still live here. But I came here to the Congress of the Partnership of Eastern Culture. It was another time. It was the Polish presidency in the EU. It was a time where in Poland we hosted the key events, the key meetings of European politicians, people of culture, artists, the time when we showed, as Lublin, that we can be a center for debate, for discussion, for meeting, for dialogue. So this is what the Congress is actually operating under different names, created by many people who are involved in many organizational challenges. People from the City Council, our partners. But on the other hand, is programming boards and multiple partners, mainly NGOs, but also public institutions that are with us, that work with us. Mr. Mayor, Please join me on the stage. Mr. Mayor is awarded distinctions of the medals of the Lublin Union to several people who are active in programming board, who have supported the Congress, who have created the program of the Congress. We would like to thank them very much for their contribution. As usual, with all the initiatives of this type, the key people are those who spend the time to build contacts, to network internationally, to prepare the content of the debates. One of them is Paweł Prokop, who has been working with us since early 90s in different roles, but the award of the medal of the Union of Lublin is a symbolic thank you to all those who have been involved in networking and building contacts in this part of Europe. The greatest contributions in that. Paweł, thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for your efforts. Julita Agnieszka Rybczyńska, PhD, is equally active in networking internationally, but also, let me point out, she's a co-author of a project that we don't know too much about today, but this can be a trigger, the kind of momentum for our future projects. The Center of European Law here in Lublin with French and Ukrainian universities in cooperation. So this is a project where next to discussions and debates, we want to be specific, that is implementation of the EU law and experiences that we get, the lessons that we learn as Poland, and we can share with other countries to help in the pre-accession periods. Thank you very much, Julita. Natalia Murkowska, also very big thanks for your involvement, for your contribution in our project. The project that is building a completely different image of Lublin city, not a city of universities, a city that is changing dynamically, but a city that has an ambition to play a key part in discussions with our partners from this part of Europe. Thank you very much. Andrzej Skórski, the same medal, is given to you with the same justification. I can say that I would like to appeal to you, don't stop in your activity, don't stop working with us, and thank you very much for your contribution so far. Last but not least, Krzysztof Stanowski is a good spirit of all the initiatives that Lublin takes internationally. Deputy Foreign Minister of Poland, Deputy Minister of Education, so a lot of experience in government, central government administration, but a man who is devoted to building relations, to building small projects, small-scale projects, being among people. Without him in Lublin, well, I will tell you for sure he'll be in Ukraine, elsewhere in the world, globally. But his activity gives us strength to build contacts, to network, to create really great projects and mutual understanding. Krzysztof, thank you very much, and big respect to what you do.
Bardzo dziękujemy, panie prezydencie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I still remember your invitation to me to join the programming board when we talk together. We meet once a month and we think about education, about business, about entrepreneurship, about women's rights. But you were there as member of the programming board even before you came back to Lublin. Yes, that's true. And I would like to thank you very much for this opportunity, and I would like to invite you to meet with all the people who organize, who build, who support this Congress. The Congress would not be possible without the support of the councillors. Let me welcome very warmly representatives of the council, the city council. They are with us, they work with us, and in difficult times financially they make decisions that allow us to continue with the Congress as something important for the Lublin brand. Let me welcome representatives of the twin cities, partner cities, our partners from NGOs. A list of them traditionally is here. Honorary patronage, as you can see, is held by the European Commission in Poland. The Commission is supporting us for several years now as an honorary patron in our programming efforts. When we think about the Congress, we think about the border, about the closest borders, the nearest borders with Ukraine, with Belarus. Historically speaking, we thought about the border with Germany. We were building relations with Germany. Today at the press conference, I said that for me, to cross the Polish-German border, you simply slow down in your car, just 90 kilometers per hour, and that's it. But from the other side, there's barbed wire. There are people waiting there, dreaming about getting into Poland. For them, it's thinking about freedom. For them, it's a dream that we used to have, that our fathers used to have for dozens of years. So the Congress is all about those projects that we pursue together, as partner cities, as the media, as NGOs, as the partners. But mostly it's about the thinking that neighbors are key, that they are needed, that they are important, that we won't have any other ones. It's about thinking about the challenges in our mutual bilateral relations in the region. We'll have the first panel discussion devoted to Belarus. And let me have Professor Beata Surmacz, head of the Institute of Eastern Europe here in Lublin, one of the many countries, Central and Eastern Europe, of course. Sorry for that. Professor will give an introductory speech to the panel, the Lublin Triangle and relations vis-a-vis Belarus. Mrs. Professor, please take the floor. Thank you very much. And let me have the panelists with me as well. Eduardas Borisovas, Ambassador of Lithuania. And thank you very much for having accepted our invitation to this discussion. Let me have with me Ihor Baranetskyi, Counselor of the Embassy of Ukraine to Poland. I'm glad and pleased to have you with us. Mr. Alaksandr Milinkiewicz, opposition candidate for president, laureate of the Sakharov Award. Thank you very much for being with us. And we've been waiting for MP Paweł Kowal. He is here with us, is he?
Natomiast chciałabym
He'll be joining us soon.
przywitać, nie wiem, czy mamy
And let me welcome
jeszcze,
online
czy widzimy pana ministra Marcina Przydacza.
Minister Marcin Przydacz.
Dzień dobry panie. Dzień dobry panie.
Mr. Minister, hello and welcome.
Pan minister Marcin Przydacz, który
Minister Marcin Przydacz, Foreign Affairs Ministry, responsible for the Eastern policy and security the issues. Thank you very much for your having accepted our invitation. Mr. Minister will have time until 11 to spend with us. So please take your seats and let's begin. Yes, and Professor Paweł Kowal is with us here. Hello and welcome.
To się nazywa mieć dobre wejście.
It's a good entree.
Pan profesor Paweł Kowal, nie zdążyłam
Professor
przedstawić,
Paweł Kowal,
poseł z ramienia koalicji,
member of the parliament of the Polish Parliament from the Civic Coalition,
profesor Instytutu Studiów
and my colleague, Professor of the Political Studies in the Polish Academy of Sciences. So not only a political perspective, but also a political science perspective as well.
jest zatytułowany.
The panel is the Lublin Triangle vis-a-vis Belarus. So let's talk about three matters, about three issues mainly. The first one, and I'll be soon addressing you for your opinion, is the Lublin Triangle itself. It's a very fresh initiative, started a year ago. I'm really proud that it actually started in Lublin, where I am from. It's a dialogue platform, a platform for cooperation between Poland, Lithuania and Ukraine. A platform which has two basic goals. First of all, to carry on with the dialogues between all the three partners to actually to develop joint positions about the situation in the region. But also, I would say the other goal is to tighten bilateral and improve bilateral relations between our countries. The Lublin Triangle members share the history, which can be an advantage, but also can be a difficulty in certain situations. They share culture or cultural community. And to show the potential of the initiative, we can say that Poland, Lithuania and Ukraine is an area of 1 million square kilometers, 80 million people living there, GDP of nearly $800 billion, access to the three Cs. So the opportunities, the potential for growing cooperation, not only politically or symbolically, but also economically, is in place. It's also a borderland of both the European Union and NATO, and this is important. So my first question to all of you is about the possibilities, the opportunities for an effective use, tapping into the potential of the initiative. So from the perspective of individual countries, what's the most important objective or area of this cooperation? These objectives do not necessarily have to overlap. What's important is that we work together to pursue the shared goals. So my question is, what the Lublin Triangle is for Poland, for Lithuania, for Ukraine? Also, if you could have a say or answer the question whether the Lublin Triangle can be an effective attempt to strengthen the voice of the countries in the region within the European Union and NATO. Should the institutional aspect of this cooperation be strengthened? How to build the identity of this initiative? That's something that we are lacking. I mean, just to build awareness among the general public globally. Or socially, not only in minds of politicians, just to strengthen its importance. So, Minister Przydacz, can you give us your view over these matters?
Thank you very much for your invitation. I would be very happy to be there with you in Lublin. However, I have been detained at the ministry by a very serious business because our situation on the eastern border is very volatile. But I'm very happy that such discussions are taking place, whether political or academic. And I'm happy this is now happening in Lublin, not only in Warsaw. And this Warsaw-centric approach in Poland is no more. And we have universities, cultural centers talking about our future, about the Lublin Triangle. And I believe Lublin now is the best place to talk about this initiative. So congratulations to everyone on this initiative. The professor asked a number of questions. Perhaps we would need to hold another Congress to discuss all these, to discuss the origins of the Lublin Triangle and the perception of individual states. I can only explain what ideas are behind this initiative, at least from the perspective of the ministry, and how this initiative started through our positive contacts with Lithuania, Ukraine, I hope Belarus in the future, and how this initiative started through diplomatic channels. Certainly, we built on history because we celebrated the anniversary of the Union of Lublin, and that anniversary was the best time to talk about shared interest, the same cultural and historical root. We went back to the time when a tolerant, open, multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious republic was not only a regional power, it was one of the major powers in contemporary Europe. And because we worked together, because we cooperated together, and our opponents were not able to divide us, we were a very strong entity. Of course, not everybody was happy with that constellation, with that leading role of the Republic. Therefore, some divisions were sparked, were inspired. The only thing we can do is to learn from that history and build strong Poland, strong Ukraine, strong Lithuania, and other neighbors based on that heritage. This is basically what our opponents fear the most. I'm not afraid to use this term, opponents, especially from the East. This is what they fear. Our community identity rested on a shared root. In fact, there are many such roots. I'm not only talking about religion or language. These are not dominating areas, but love of freedom, love of human dignity, respect for subjectivity of states, of nations, this is what we have in common. So this historical foundation was a great start for later cooperation. But further strengthening of our shared identity was perhaps one of the objectives only. It was important, but not the only objective. Another thing is security, political cooperation, and economic cooperation. This is something still that needs to be addressed. If this triangle initiative grows, we will certainly work on that. The last 2 years have been successful, I believe. I mean, we started to rekindle the traditions of cooperation. And I'm happy that Poland is no longer the only, but it used to be the only nation referring back to the traditions of the First Republic. Our eastern neighbors, sometimes for some internal reasons or due to politics, they were trying to seek their own ways. And Poland sometimes would not be open to share this tradition. But I believe that if we decide to share our heroes like Kościuszko, like Moniuszko, Mickiewicz, these people of the First Republic, although sometimes born under partitions, still for all our nations, they are very prominent figures. And I believe that both Lithuania, after the troubles we had together in the 1920s and 30s, and the revival of nationalist ideas, today Lithuania is a mature, solid partner, also referring to its past, but in a very respectful way. And Ukraine today, which is of course going through some internal discussion on a future format that will enable a unification of the country. But if you look at the declaration of our three ministries, I am not only happy with the signature of the Minister of Lithuania, but also of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. And Ukraine, seeking its way in Europe, also relies on the tradition of the First Republic, of the Commonwealth. And places like Hachim, mentioned in the declaration, or certain historical figures mentioned in the declaration, they are our shared heroes, our shared places. And I believe that future generations, our future, should be rested on such conclusions. We have shared history, build future on our shared history. As regards institutionalization, I think at this stage, this formula of cooperation is the best possible way. I mean, as a forum of exchange of ideas, of political dialogue, especially looking at recent developments and aggressive policy of Lukashenko. I think the Lublin Triangle has proven as a forum to reconcile positions, to agree on opinions and steps to take in response to this aggressive policy of Eastern neighbors. Of course, this is not the ultimate role of Lublin Triangle, but it helps. Now, I believe in the future, Belarus will also be part of this constellation, but since now Belarus is far from it's very uncertain, so we have to discuss it. Lublin Triangle vis-a-vis Belarus at the political level as regards cooperation with Belarus. The Lublin Triangle is not possible as an open formula, but it's not closed forever. And of course it's still open at the social level, at the people-to-people level. We have academic cooperation, cultural cooperation, and the Belarusian nation as the fourth component of the First Republic has the right, even maybe obligation, to be part of our discussion. I remember the original idea of the Lublin Triangle. It was the funeral of our January uprising heroes in Vilnius. They fell under the emblem combining the symbols of three nations, and I think this bottom-up approach, folk or national or cultural, whatever we name it, this should be a starting point for our cooperation formula. As regards a certain hype or recognition of this initiative, of course it should grow, but at this moment we should focus on this Lublin Triangle format to continue in political terms, to continue within our nations, so that we grow our subjectivity and our resilience to external pressure. Just by relying on referring to our common root, whether we speak in the European Forum or NATO, well, this is a matter of the future. Today, it's the hard moments, it's the turning point when we have to defend the unity of the European Union, protect our eastern border against hybrid activities, attacks from our eastern neighbors. This is a reality now, and you have to defend your border, sometimes through very straightforward, very open policy. As Milinkiewicz used to say, optimism will not replace Poland, and today we can say idealism will not replace security. So we need this cooperation between Vilnius, Kiev, and I hope in the future, thanks God, also Minsk. And this format of good cooperation should continue by all means. Thank you, Minister. We would like to hear Lithuanian perspective now, please. Good morning, Mr. Mayor of Lublin, Mr. Minister, ladies and gentlemen, dear speakers. Thank you for having me on this panel and in this event, Transborder Cooperation Congress. Transborder cooperation is also a tool in good neighborhood in any region, but in particular in this region. I'm very happy every time I come to Lublin, because Lublin is particularly important. If we look at not only Polish-Lithuanian relations, but regional relations. 1386, the first union between Poland and Lithuania, the Union of Lublin, the 16th century. A few years ago we celebrated 450th anniversary, and Lublin all the time keeps supplying this energy, and the Lublin Triangle is a crowning achievement, in a sense, of all these attempts. And Lublin is therefore a very symbolic site for our approachment, for our cooperation. If we speak about the Lublin Triangle from our perspective, it's not so different from yours or from Ukrainians. We do understand, and we understand each other, that cooperation of these three countries is absolutely necessary and also relevant for the security of the region. And in the agreement establishing the Lublin Triangle and the action plan later on signed in Vilnius, when it comes to security, this is a very important element of our trilateral cooperation. And also there's a question of the future of Ukraine in the system of transatlantic security. Together with Poland, we do support Ukraine's aspirations to be part of NATO. At least Ukraine should be given a promise or a clear perspective on possible membership in the future. We also support Ukraine in its struggle for integrity, for sovereignty. There's absolutely no difference in our approach to that. There's no difference of opinion in terms of Ukraine's independence and the future of Crimea and the position of Crimea. This position of our three states is clear about this. And also in terms of military cooperation, it's not only about supplying arms, but also shared or joint exercises with the Ukrainian army and training of Ukrainian army in NATO standards. And we do have very practical cooperation under this shared brigade, military brigade based in Lublin. The brigade named after Konstantin Ostrowski, our common hero. So this is very important point for this cooperation. And also Ukrainian army banners have been adapted to NATO standards, and perhaps some operational use of this brigade is possible in the future. In peacemaking operations, this is something absolutely realistic. And there is also a major cooperation to face propaganda coming from Russia, from Belarus, and also joint exercises, joint training for our ministries on how to oppose that propaganda is essential. As Mr. Minister said, we can work on resilience. Also, among local residents, among communities in our countries, to defend themselves against propaganda. We have seen texts, articles by President Putin, different insinuations, different opinions of President Lukashenko, some references to historic events in the region. We cannot allow history to be rewritten, and we have to stage campaigns to strengthen our historic remembrance and strengthen unity, or the image of unity of our states.
We have rich and common history, so good examples that we can give. The anniversary of Chosim battle, or the anniversary of the death of Jan Karol Chodkiewicz, the commander-in-chief of the Commonwealth Army, including Zaporozhye, the army, or the common celebrations of the Union of Lublin, the anniversary, or the Constitution of the 3rd May. All these are examples where our cooperation can be built on to develop the common identity of the region, common image of the region. Together with Poland, we are we are closely working and supporting Ukrainian ambitions to join the EU. I think it's very important that the doors need to be opened for Ukraine once it has fulfilled the conditions for membership. And we are in favor of opening the EU to accept Ukraine in the future. So there's a huge potential for Ukrainians' involvement in regional partnerships and initiatives like the 3 Cs initiative, where the cooperation in development and the growth of road to energy infrastructure to strengthen not only the region as such, but individual countries such as Lithuania, Poland, or precisely Ukraine. And to strengthen digital and technologies and infrastructure is the future of our economies. That's something that all the countries of the initiative, of the 3 Cs initiatives, can benefit from. So Ukraine is a key partner here. And again, I really support and uphold Ukraine's participation in the initiative. Together we are supporting and we share positions over Nord Stream 2 pipeline. It's also a matter that is covered by Russian propaganda as an economic project, but we know very well that it's a geopolitical project, and we uphold Ukrainian and Polish position on that matter, and we'll speak about Belarus in a while. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now, what the Lublin Triangle is for Ukraine. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank all the organizers, first of all. I can see that Lublin, is competitive to Warsaw even, as Mr. Mayor yesterday hosted our foreign minister in Lublin. A series of very important events, unveiling of the monument Father Ponczowi. So it's yet another confirmation of our shared history, of our shared heroes that we mentioned before. And it's really key that within the Lublin Triangle project, it's not an artificial project, it's a real, natural thing. It's connecting our countries in historical and cultural terms. And it's not only about our future, it's not only about the history, it's about our common future. So it's really key that it's not about devising or contriving some artificial projects that would be contrary to the raison d'etat of all the members. The point is that the Lublin Triangle can be a tool to support the existing initiatives, to support what we have envisaged in our constitutions, in our plans, in our projects. And for the first time in history, I would say, Ukrainian constitution provides for the future membership of in the European Union, in NATO. And we think that our involvement in the Lublin Triangle can be a tool to strengthen this cooperation. It's not a point to generate, to devise something new. If it's useless, well, once we have invented a bicycle, we don't need a new one. But the Lublin Triangle can be, a dietary supplement, so to say, an instrument to actually bolster, to support, to strengthen Ukraine's ambitions on its way, on the way it has chosen to pursue the projects that will help us join the organizations that we dream of joining in the future. And back to Belarus, it's really important that we should never reject a plea for help. And not so long ago, Ukraine was in a situation where the President Yanukovych tried to push Ukraine in a reverse direction to what Ukrainian people actually wanted. It was a treason on his part, and mind you, we were in favor, we supported the Ukrainian people, regardless of what that president was speaking about. So we'll get back to Belarus in a while, but as for the projects, what's important to me is that during the Karpacz Economic Forum, we succeeded in organizing a meeting between prime ministers of Ukraine and Poland, and then our prime minister actually suggested that we organize a meeting of the Lublin Triangle at the level of the heads of governments, heads of state, heads of governments, Ukraine and Poland. So there is an opportunity for this, if not this year, then beginning next year. So this will give us an excellent opportunity to discuss the institutionalization and the practical implementation, practical pursuit of the projects that are in the best interest of all the members of the Lublin Triangle. Thank you very much. Let us have the political and political science perspective from Professor Paweł Kowal. I'll do my best, I promise. The first association that I have, this is a political scientific perspective. The first association that I have when explaining to someone abroad, if they asked what the Lublin Triangle is about, in my opinion, this initiative is one of the initiatives of the current government, although I am a member of the opposition, that I'm in favor of, that I support. But if I were to explain what the initiative is about, and this opinion is based on what I have just heard, I would use the concept that can be useful to all of us. Because, political scientific notions or concepts or terms are the key words, so to say. There's a book by a cultural philosopher, Charles Taylor, about social imaginaria. So Taylor says that social imaginaria are kind of concepts that we have about reality that somehow, and this is my interpretation of Taylor, that go beyond what the elites actually understand. This is, imaginaria are deeply rooted in social awareness, something that make us different from the others. So I think that the Lublin Triangle actually fits perfectly in our imaginarium in the Central and Eastern Europe. It tells everything about us, about our foreign policy. There are a number of matters in Polish foreign policy that tell us what we have in our heads, what books we have read, what debates we have attended, what upbringing we have caught. The Polish-Georgian relations are the best example. The main driving force behind them is our imaginaria, that is fight against Russian imperialism, that we support each other, that we can be counted on, that we are cool in our foreign policies. And this is the case with the Lublin Triangle. It actually responds very well to what we think about ourselves. We get back to the first Commonwealth. We go back to the shared history. We say that our relations are very good, that Poland can be an advocate, a supporter for our neighbors, our eastern neighbors in Western institutions. This is something that makes us feel comfortable in the Lublin Triangle. This initiative tells everything about what we think we are. And part of what we think we are is true, as we all know, and some are untrue. But it's not a matter for discussion just now. What I feel obliged to contribute to this discussion is to say where I can see the real problem and the real role for the initiative for Poland. And let me be politician just now. The problem that I can see is with Ukraine. I think, or I'm convinced, I believe that there is a serious threat to the pro-European orientation in Ukraine. And sometimes we kind of get used to and me too, myself too. We get accustomed to, these Central European ideas and patterns that we simply, cannot see the forest for the trees. So we know that there's a serious U-turn in U.S. policies, a shift towards towards Asia. We know that the EU is in crisis. We could discuss the depth of this crisis. There's a crisis of enlargement, I would say. And part of the crisis is Poland, because now in the European Union there are voices heard that, Poland and Hungary were invited too early to join. So there's a kind of paradox that we are entangled in. Because we say, the EU needs to be enlarged. The political promise needs to be given for enlargement. And those who oppose, those who have waited impatiently since 2004 for any errors that Poland or Hungary may have made. So what's really necessary is to ensure Ukraine, and Ukraine is a key to the east. With all respect, it's not Belarus, it's not Moldavia, and it's not Georgia. If Ukraine fails in its pro-European attitudes, then the third imperium, the third empire of Putin will emerge. So we'll lose completely all the other elements. So whether it's Georgia, whether it's Belarus, whether it's Moldavia, with Moldavia, it's kind of specific. We've got some channels via Romania to communicate with Moldavia. But Ukraine is key to maintain the pro-Western orientation that emerged and has strengthened in the post-Soviet territories over the last 30 years. So how to avoid the catastrophe, or what would be the catastrophe? The catastrophe would be that, the U.S. oriented to the southeastern Asia, the EU focused on solving internal problems, and in the south of Europe simply leaves Ukraine alone, leaves Ukraine on its own, under propaganda, under the political pressure from Russia. And if it turns out that the pure pro-European drive among Ukrainian voters is not enough, then perhaps sooner than later, in my opinion, it would be enough for pro-Russian political forces to win elections in Ukraine, and that's enough, and we lost. Those forces may claim the multivectoral idea as their own. The multivectoral idea is, in fact, about opening to Russian penetration in full and to pave the way for restitution or reinstatement of the empire, just tacitly, or behind the curtains. So Ukraine would then fail, and we would be harmed as well, just by the way. So what we can do in the Lublin Triangle, we can develop tools to prevent that. One of the tools can be a proposal, an attempt to open the initiative raised by Georgia, that is associated the countries, the initiative for a kind of new Eastern partnership. Then perhaps it's about forcing our Eastern partners, further declarations on the opening of the door to the European Union. And my impression is that this initiative, that is deeply rooted, as I said, in our social imaginarium of our role, of our foreign policy, that this, just to focus on Ukraine today, can be told to to be around Ukraine. So the deep and free trade the area, visa-free movement of people, the political cooperation. Without that, we cannot succeed. Simply. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor, for this very broad perspective that you have given us, and for pointing to the priority areas, priority tasks that the Lublin Triangle actually has, to develop the common tools, shared positions. We'll need to take that on.
Let me turn to Alaksandr Milinkiewicz and talk about Belarus now. I think we don't have to repeat that from any perspective. Free Belarus is naturally part of this initiative. As the ministers said, this fourth chair is waiting for you. And we're ready. When Belarus is ready, when Belarus becomes free and democratic, this will be no more a triangle, but a Lublin quartet, or Lublin square. So my first question is, I'm not sure if you are able to answer this, but when do you think this may be possible? I mean, free Belarus. How do you judge the potential of Belarusian opposition and readiness and potential of the society to change? Well, thank you for giving me the floor and for this question. Mr. Mayor, ministers, colleagues, thank you very much for inviting me in the first place. It's a very important Congress, a very important initiative. I believe that politics is not only made in capitals, but such initiatives like the Lublin Triangle at a regional level is absolutely great. And this Ploszcza, which is like a Belarusian Maidan in 2006, and there were a number of people protesting, taking to the streets, and we talked to Polish journalists, saying, if not Poland, who else can support us? Who else has this solidarity tradition? So now I can say, who else, if not Lublin, can start this initiative that is absolutely feasible and implementable? I'm a man of civil society. I was never a member of any party. I was also local government activist after Perestroika, and I absolutely respect and appreciate this initiative. And I'm afraid at the local government level, Belarus is not a partner because Belarus has no local governments. Although it used to have, it still has mayors in cities, but who is the partner? You can't talk to regime. You can't work with regime. Although Mr. Stanowski knows that some time ago, and perhaps Minister Kowal also knows it, at some point in the European Union, there were hopes to turn Lukashenko into a Democrat, into a European. And from the Brussels perspective, maybe that seemed possible, but in Belarus, we always say, when we ask for dialogue with Belarus, we don't want to see the isolation of the Belarusian nation. We would like Belarusians to be open to neighboring countries, which is, I believe, not easy to implement, but absolutely necessary. Today we have two Belaruses, one minority consolidated around Lukashenko. They have their interests. Sometimes they just fear. Sometimes this is greed for money. Them and their families support Lukashenko because they see there is no other way if the regime collapses. It's hard to perform sociological studies in Belarus. They are banned in Belarus. But there's a lot of going on the internet. Of course, the internet is just part of the society, but in Belarus, more than 80 people can access the internet. There is the best internet infrastructure in Eastern Europe. This is in Belarus. The regime has invested a lot of money because they, at some point, realized that IT as a sector is a great source of income. And today, we can build on that. We can use that to our advantage. So we have a pretty good road infrastructure in Belarus. I was driving from Warsaw to Lublin yesterday, and we have similar roads to every major town in Belarus. And even in economy, there are some hopes for reforms, but people is the major capital. We have good engineers. I'm a physicist. I'm a physicist, I'm an IT expert, and I know we have really strong technical colleges, schools. We have strong humanities. This is where we can join forces to work together. So there are two Belaruses, one around Lukashenko and the other. And this is majority are pro-European, pro-democratic and pro-Belarusian, people who want to live in an independent country at home, a country that seeks European values. This is not going to change. Lukashenko keeps trying, but he seems to shoot into his own legs. With all this violence, just open state-run terrorism, they are only worsening their own situation. They are really on the verge, standing over a cliff. And I believe we will win, but we don't know when and what price we will have to pay. The price is really high. The stakes are really high even today. If they ask me in Poland, what's it like in Belarus? And I say, it's a bit like in Poland in 1981. Martial state, detention of leaders, of activists. And here in Belarus, it resembles 1937 and Stalin's times. Of course, they don't shoot people in the street and they don't transport people to Siberia, but there is fear. The major tool is fear. The regime scares people to death. Previously, they expel people from universities and from work. Now it's prison and tortures. And there is major fear in the society. And you shouldn't really reproach Belarusians for not taking to streets today, because they really have to pay a very high price. You have to approach Belarus strategically. You have to be future-oriented and prepare good transformation, good cadre, good personnel, and they are there already, I mean also being trained in Poland. And you have to follow what has been going on in Estonia, Lithuania, Poland in terms of reform, in terms of change. If we do this, we can win. So everybody has to do what they can in their own field. And whenever I do something, I always ask myself this question: is it good for Kremlin? Is it good for Lukashenko? If they do something, we just do the opposite. So what Putin is doing today, he's saying that a major work to be done in Belarus is education. Russian education should be everywhere. So it's a total invasion of Russian education. So it means, well, Belarusian will not be Russia again, because Belarusians will sense that. Instead, Russia is invading Belarus with cultural and education patterns. What we can do in response is European education. The internet can do this because it knows no borders. And yesterday, before the concert, I was saying that we wake up in the morning and we keep thinking, what about Lukashenko? What Lukashenko is going to do? What he's going to say? Instead, we should wake up in the morning and think what we can do now, what we can do today or tomorrow. So we have to think about this moment. We have to keep in mind this moment when Lukashenko is gone. And then think what happens to Belarus. Is it going to be a protectorate of Russia, or will it follow Europe? Because we are Europeans. This is absolutely important. We have to think about this day when Lukashenko is gone. Even if the economy is bad, because we have a major slowdown now, but I think identity will decide whether Belarusians have identity, whether they have historical awareness, cultural awareness. And this is what we can do for Belarusians, even at the local, at the regional level. Because Ukraine will no longer be allied with Russia because they have changed the national awareness. And look at the protests in Belarus. It was a starting point for a great revival of civic society. It was an absolutely top quality event for me. Originally, they feared the white and red Polish banner. They were gazing towards Russia, but when we had this white, red and white banner, even Putin hesitated. He had his strategies to follow and respond to this national process. And we have to really influence people's awareness, people's thinking. Maybe we should say, okay, folks, pull yourself together, change your country, and you will live like your neighbors. And even those who don't have this awareness, because Russia keeps promising very concrete benefits. But if we keep identity, we will not lose if we keep this identity when Lukashenko is gone. Well, thank you very much for this response. What can we do as the Lublin Triangle? Do we have a strategy to respond to what is going on in Belarus? Do we have any tools to act beyond oral declarations, declarations of support for refugees? for anyone who wants to leave Belarus.
Dziękuję uprzejmie. Przede wszystkim
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the previous statement on the Ukrainian part. I really support this. Well, identity is the basic thing for our countries, and we are fighting not only for territory, for sovereignty, we fight for people, for their identity. So it's an important question, what can we do? In fact, Ukraine is doing it. Ukrainian success is automatically a support for Belarus. This is how it works. And a difficult question to Ukraine is when. I still remember in late 80s, if someone had said that the Baltics could regain sovereignty or independence and would have joined the NATO, European Union, then would have said that was impossible. So we are not optimists, we are realists. We are realistic in our hopes to regain the Crimean Peninsula, that is temporarily occupied by Russia. Of course, we are actually to move in the right direction for European integration. We are to implement reforms. We need to be ready for different situations, for Plan A, Plan B, and so on. No dictatorship is, is eternal. Is going to stay forever. And as a person who is passionate about economic diplomacy and economy as such, I would like to stress that we have very good Polish-Ukrainian relations, growing rapidly, over 10 billion balance in our foreign trade. We have broken, consecutive records in FDI, Ukrainian FDIs in Poland, and so on. So now China perhaps is the largest trade partner, but Poland ranks the second globally. The second largest export market for Ukraine. It's very good dynamics that we observe. So economic ties really help integration, our European ambitions. And I just forgot to mention a bottleneck in our relations. It's the border. We mentioned the Polish-German border. We looked at the situation and we actually noticed that before Poland's joining the EU, the number of border crossings, that is the throughput across the border between Poland and Germany, was 10 times of what we have at the Polish-Ukrainian border now. And it's a really important element of integration. So it's a bottleneck I would mention. But back to Belarus, let me stress that, first of all, it's about the fight for identity. It's because our tries, our attempts by Russia to have the Belarusian language forgotten, the Belarusian identity forgotten, to establish, a single nation, a single Russian nation. It's not true. Every country has the right to pursue its own identity, as Ukraine is pursuing, as Belarus is pursuing, and we'll be fighting on. We'll be defending what's ours, and we are in favor, we support Belarusian people. So, hand by hand, I think, I hope, I believe that perhaps not within a year, not within 2 years, but quite soon, we'll get success with what we are doing with our initiatives also within the Lublin Triangle. Thank you very much for this statement, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much. First of all, long live Belarus, żyje Belarus. It's not a secret that the countries, the members of the Lublin Triangle, do the utmost to support Belarusian people in their efforts to build a democratic and truly independent state. And they're supporting Belarusian opposition in doing so. All the three, Poland, Lithuania, and Ukraine. And on the other hand, there's a conviction in Ukraine that the Lublin Triangle is just a transitional or interim instrument. In the nearest future, we will transform it into the Lublin quadruple. It's even now that we organize events, conferences that Belarusian opposition takes part as the fourth member of the format. On the other hand, it's clear what conditions are in place for Belarus to establish, the proper bilateral relations or international relations, that is, abandons any violence. As mentioned here, we still remember the state of martial law in Poland. So we need to change what's going on in Belarus. Release, to have all the political prisoners released, and free elections, so that Belarusian people can freely choose their representatives, including the president as head of state. On the other hand, we are anxious about Russia's attempt to have Belarus incorporated in a single state. It's an attempt, in our opinion, to change the entire geopolitical situation in the region, and we believe that no agreements signed by Lukashenko regime cannot and must not be recognized as legally valid. This is about all the agreements signed with between Lukashenko and Russia. This developing situation with Russia is just like with the Crimea. Unlawfulness, generates unlawfulness, and there are consequences for the international relations as well. So we need to be able to recognize the dangers that are coming from Lukashenko regime and what's going on at the borders between Belarus, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia. This is the optics that we need to take, and as citizens, as people, as inhabitants, we need to be resistant to hostile propaganda of Lukashenko's regime. We need to support our border guards. What they do is actually a hard work, and it's their skills and capacities and capabilities actually we depend on, and this attack testifies that the regime is desperate, is looking for different ways to undermine the ambitions in neighboring countries, to disrupt the policies. But we need to keep by our values, and we believe that these values will generate the desired outcomes. Thank you very much. And Mr. Professor, why don't you give us your answer, whether we have any real opportunities, any real possibilities to act? Well, I'm trying to escape, the phrase, it seems to me, or I believe. No, I know that the strategic situation has already changed. I'm standing attendee of conferences on Eastern policies, and the first thought that comes to my mind is that we speak like, it was 3 years ago, that, the pandemic cancelled the time. The strategic situation has changed. Lukashenko is an European Assad. It will be very difficult to get him back to the normal circulation. It's an example, one for a long time, that the West has failed to bring them on board. This is like with Assad. Lukashenko has gone too far just to have the relations, mutual relations, bilateral relations, reinstated to what we had previously. And this is the opportunity that Putin took to change the geostrategic situation. Due to the operations by the special forces, we are actually bordering the Russian Empire that Putin is diligently rebuilding. Is there anything we can do as the Lublin Triangle? Yes, and you know it. We can handle tactics. Perhaps there's also a strategic aspect to it, but to receive the emigrants and refugees from Belarus of different kinds. If I were an advisor to the Polish government, or if the Polish government listened to me, well, I would say that this is the best strategic investment you can think of, because to change, to overthrow this European Assad may take several years, but it will happen, it's inevitable. But perhaps it's worthwhile investing in those people who want to come here. Perhaps Warsaw, Lublin, Krakow, Wrocław can be made the second homes. And a range of other activities that are pursued partly by the Polish government and partly not. The limit of the Polish government for the Polish government is the bad relations with the European institutions. If it had good relations with EU institutions, we could do more. But there are things that we must praise the government for. That's like, educational programs or education cooperation programs. And as for Belarus, the government, is responding as I would wish it to respond. The problem is, in Europe, in acting on the EU scale. But I have a feeling of the mission. But also, I would like to be clear in my statement. What's key, in my opinion, is Ukraine. You can't have, propaganda impact on Belarus without the propaganda influence in Ukraine. So I think that the mission, the key mission for Polish politicians should be Ukraine. So just let's skip, the historical background. Let's get aware that perhaps we are in a situation where within 2 or 3 years will be decisive in Ukraine. I think that I'm able to judge the situation in Ukraine properly. To go underneath, to go under the surface in my judgment. Well, one can say, the support for Zelensky is stable, perhaps not high, but stable. Then, the opposition could be some, pro-Russian factor in the game just within a couple of years. It's not as simple as that. I think that sometimes in politics, there's just one minor cog that moves the whole machinery. And I think that today, Ukrainian society, Ukraine is a democratic state and, holds elections, just like Georgia and Moldavia. the Ukrainian society needs a clear signal, needs a European fuel before it's too late.
Umawiamy się na konferencję na ten
Thank you very much. And my understanding is that this is about us organizing another conference on this matter. Well, I think we need to awaken. We need to wake up. We need to awaken people to make them aware of what's going on in Ukrainian politics and in Polish politics, and to make them aware that we cannot do anything eastwards without Ukraine. We cannot push the doors open for the three associated countries to join the EU without good cooperation in the EU. If it's our experience from the Eastern Partnership. All these movements, accelerated signing of the partnership agreements. Poland was the catalyzer for these, and I would like to see Poland acting in that direction. So, again, Professor, it's another conference that we'll be organizing to discuss that. Now we have several minutes in this session. Let us have a Q&A session involving the audience. And let me remind you that the online attendees can also ask questions via the online tools, but you have priority in asking your questions. Is there anyone? Please introduce yourself and give us a brief question. Stanisław Brzozowski, councillor of the Lublin city. Question to Minister Kowal. Over the last sentence, over the last statement he gave, I don't see any correlation between our relations with the EU and our possibilities to influence the Eastern policy. All the more so that I think that our interests are not identical, not the same as the EU's concerning the Eastern policy. I would mention, the Union of Lublin as an example of the differences in the historical conditions, so to say. Well, it's Germany that is key for Ukrainian foreign policy, and Germany is not. Germany's interests are not the same as Poland's. Thank you very much for this question. Also, I'd like to add to that what specific actions for Ukraine precisely, but also indirectly supporting Belarus, we could take. Just give us a single example of a specific action. Let us start. Both questions are to Professor Kowal. Mr. Councillor, Mr. Brzozowski, don't take it personally, and I will speak my mind. Let me answer this. There is a close correlation, because if you want to propose, and Eastern Partnership is 10 years old, so if we can propose our Eastern Partnership 2.0, we cannot do it without the EU institutions. We cannot do it without Germany. Germany is, if we talk about good political game, if we pursue good political game, let me remind you just of a very special moment. It's a rhetorical question. When the decision was made to have Eastern Partnership in that form and not another one, that date was the 1st of September 2008. That is the first session of the European Council after intervention in Georgia. And in Poland, we had cohabitation. That is President Kaczynski and Civic Platform and PSL government, with the foreign minister being Radek Sikorski. And the council, the meeting on the 1st of September 2008, was an example of the best cooperation between President Kaczynski and Mr. Sikorski. So we lost to France, even though we had support from Bush, US president. But after that, and this is the way diplomacy works, then Germany had to concede in the EU forum. So don't let me get into the Polish prejudices. Well, if we want to undermine Germany, this is the policy that Prime Minister Kaczynski's government in 2006-2007 pursued. Actually, they accused of European Parliament and so on, but they left the European Commission alone and President Barroso, because it's an institution that represents all of us towards the external world, also the stronger entities. And mind you, whatever the government is in Germany, it's one of the biggest economies in the world. We need to strengthen the shared institutions, that is the European Commission or the Court of Justice of the European Union. And this will give us an opportunity to lobby good solutions for for our eastern neighbors. And these arguments are supported by, historical experience. Of course, any strong movement or strong action towards Eastern policies had a strong Poland say at the core. And mind you, as for the intervention in Georgia, Russians tried to falsify the history. They claimed that it was the Georgian army that fired the first shots. It was just the reverse. But this shows you that when Poland acted in solidarity with European institutions, it was successful. It had strength to influence the Eastern policies. If it didn't, it hadn't. So what we can do now, well, something that perhaps seems impossible to achieve, but the level of external threat can influence internal policies in two ways. And I'm a political scientist now. It can be as it was in 1989, that is, make the government cut off themselves from anything else, anyone others, and and focus on what they can save the skins. But it can be just the reverse. Perhaps there may be a politician that would say, well, let's play together just now. It's a kind of purely British custom. So this guarantees the extension of the social base to involve the opposition in the talks. So the other way, the latter, is a wiser one. It's also most beneficial to the government party. So it's really good to have someone to be able to talk to the government party, to explain to them. And these are rare cases in the world, but they are universal. So what should we do to achieve that? We need to get a consensus, a small consensus in foreign policy. In the case of Belarus, we can do it. Although I love Georgia, I like Moldavia, but there's no sense, no point in discussing all these details if we lose, the very core of the EU's Eastern policy. So this is the political solution, the political way. Politically, we need to integrate the elites around the threats in our eastern neighborhood. So simply or briefly, ask for cooperation with Germany or EU institutions. the things that we say about the Lublin Triangle or the policies towards Belarus, we must not forget, the elephant in China shop, and these are sanctions. Without Germany, without the EU institutions, blanket sanctions are not possible, and this is the core instrument of pressure on the Belarusian regime and on the Russian regime as well. Thank you very much. Any other questions? If there are no questions, I think that we are just spot on time. Thank you very much for your participation, for your contributions to the discussion. As I understand, we'll have Ukraine-focused conference to be organized from the geostrategic perspective, and this will be the case. I promise you, Professor. Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Beata Surmacz, head of the Eastern Europe Institute. Thank you, Mr. Eduardas, Borisovas, Ihor, Baranetskyi, Alaksandr Milinkiewicz, Paweł, Kowal, and Minister Marcin Przydacz. We'll have a 15-minute break just now, and please, big bravo to the attendees of the first panel. After the break, the subject matter will be changed a bit, something that is very important for the youth. Urban space planning from the point of view of social participation, how to build a city, the urban environment in dialogue with the citizens, with the youth. After a 15-minute break. Thank you very much.